Welcome to INSEAD's Investing in Inclusion interview series, where we are exploring the theme of what it means for business leaders and their organizations to move beyond merely pledging a commitment to diversity to investing concretely in the policies that create inclusive environments. These leaders advance diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just within their companies, but also in the communities in which they operate. I am Sharon Brooks, INSEAD's Executive Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Today, I have the distinct privilege of being in conversation with Dirk Luiten from the MBA class of 89J. Dirk is an incredibly engaged and supportive alum. Welcome, Dirk.
Thank you, Sharon, for having me for this conversation. It's a pleasure.
He's a member of the Women in Business Alumni Club Executive Committee and has been a key supporter of INSEAD's gender initiative. Dirk has also been an invaluable supporter and collaborator as we lay the foundation for the school's DEI function. He is a managing director at Levant Capital Management. However, within the INSEAD community, his most important titles have been that of a true ally, mentor, and sponsor to others. Over the course of his career, he has developed a range of expertise. He has a law degree in addition to an MBA. Dirk has also been an investor and CEO of small retail companies. He honed his keen insights and sharp analytical skills as a strategic management consultant at Arthur D. Little and Accenture. Dirk has found profound purpose in applying this expertise to help foster principles of diversity and inclusion in the business world. Through his collaboration with Diversity and Performance, he coaches business leaders to create more inclusive environments. And in true INSEAD tradition, Dirk has lived and worked in Brussels, Madrid, and Tokyo. He has generously agreed to share lessons from this wide range of experiences today. Welcome again, Dirk. It's such a pleasure to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here, Sharon.
And so my first question for you is, why did you go to law school?
You're asking me to go back in time, Sharon. This is quite a number of years ago, but let me try to remind what brought me to law school. On the top of my head, in high school, the dominant logic was mathematics. And so for about 6 years, 8 hours a week of mathematics prepared me for a scientific, more mathematical career. At the same time, I'm the fourth of 4 siblings, and when the moment of choice came, I had an older brother doing engineering, a doctor, second brother doing doctor studies, and my sister was doing law school. What intrigued me as the opposite of the mathematical world was how societies actually make values, transform values into laws, and particularly how judges take decisions, interpret the law. I was intrigued by that totally other side of society versus mathematics. And so I took the big leap and decided to go to law school.
Oh, wonderful. And then, having gone to law school, what inspired you to then pursue an MBA?
Well, law school was not just it. The love for mathematics came back very quickly. Because after law school, I did do an economics degree, mostly focused on mathematics again. And then I decided to go to INSEAD because honestly, Sharon, I had no real knowledge about management and I wanted to be a European manager. So the MBA was actually absolutely necessary to just acquire the skills to be a manager.
And having done that, right, you then went into management consulting. And how did that come about?
Well, I am afraid I have to go back to the siblings. My oldest brother was a management consultant. And what I felt was that management consulting allowed me to, in a short time period, learn about a lot of management questions and how top managers analyze situations, think about solutions, and then realize the solutions. At Arthur D. Little, it was all about innovation. How do we want to grow? At Accenture, it was all about realizing and executing large-scale change. And both have not disappointed me, really were valuable in my life.
Absolutely. And as I said, it honed analytical skills. And you have chosen a profession which you and I have spent a lot of time discussing this, has actually become a passion for you. right?
Yeah.
And that is helping to embed the values of inclusivity in the business world, right? And so how have you seen the conversation around diversity and inclusion evolve?
There's a big evolution going on. I think that we have moved from, well, actually as an INSEAD alumnus, from day one in INSEAD we were an incredibly culturally diverse environment. We all remember our MBA or executive education, where you find yourself with as many nationalities as one can imagine. I think in INSEAD I met more different nationalities than in any other place. And what we do is we work together. And INSEAD has always provided that opportunity to people to actually, while they're on campus doing or the MBA or whatever degree or executive education, to experience how it is to work and deliver value together between different cultures. That has been around in our school for a very long time. We did see some changes appearing, and they were actually similarly in society taking place. I would say like around 2010, suddenly the school realized that there were other dimensions of diversity that we could actually make more explicit. And so a number of initiatives came alive in our school. The INSEAD Gender Initiative came along, but also we started thinking of the Africa the geography, how we could better actually raise the awareness of our students and our participants around those themes. That is stage two. I call this stage two, the stage in which we all together started deepening the other dimensions of diversity apart from culture. The last phase, Sharon, is the one that you are representing. I think that the establishment of the Office for Diversity and Inclusion in the school actually is a mega leap. Because from initially letting us experience diversity as students, now we are in a phase where the school has decided this is one of the core institutional values that will differentiate us from other business schools.
So Dirk, could you share with our audience your reflections on how the conversation around diversity, equity, and inclusion has evolved within this unique environment of the INSEAD community?
The INSEAD community, as from the start, cultural diversity has been always present in any class, be it in your program, in executive education, you find yourself with people from the most different nationalities. So cultural diversity has been around since the creation of the school and remains a very important component for us. A second phase was actually when we had a number of initiatives that came alive in the school. I'm thinking of the INSEAD Gender Initiative, for example. I'm thinking of the Africa Initiative. I'm thinking of OutSEAD that was created. You could see how a number of specific initiatives on the campus and in the alumni community came alive. The last phase is the most important phase. That's the phase where the school, Sharon, has decided to create the Office for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, where we are here today. Because that is a decision where the school has decided to institutionalize the concept of diversity and inclusion and equity, changing many things in the sense that the school has now decided that it's clearly a differentiator versus other business schools. So this is the phase we are now in.
And we can see how that evolution has happened, you know, as we think about how global INSEAD is, how many perspectives and cultures intersect here. The evolution outside of INSEAD, however, it may not feel as organic. And could you tell us a little bit about how you see that conversation around DEI and inclusivity evolving outside of INSEAD in the business world?
Based on many years of being present in this area, I like to kind of see that organizations have reacted to diversity and inclusion and acted in different behaviors, different types. And they actually coincide with the evolution inside the business world. A first group of organizations are practicing what I call compliance. There is a legal change, there is a legal obligation, maybe in the industry sector there's a dominant logic, and the organization is responding in a compliance mode. Tick the box. It started 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when legal changes really popped in many countries around us, and many organizations have stayed in that mode. That was actually the start of it. A second phase is when organizations decided to become more active, and I call it the soft approach around the diversity and inclusion. It was a phase in which human resources typically took on interest, started organizing events around who am I, meditation, but organizations kind of put it in the soft box. It was something which was very much HR driven. I think that has been around for more than 10 years. Then there has been a phase that I call the flavor of the month phase. Companies started organizing monthly trainings in unconscious bias, in meditation, in receiving feedback. But it didn't really fit together. That's why what I call it flavor of the month. People in the organization would say, oh, what is there this month? And they would go, I go there because I have to go there, I've done my job by going there. But it was a flavor of the month approach. And the last part is when leaders in organizations, and this is the last 10 years also, when suddenly you see that leaders are starting to behave as inclusive as possible and talking about diversity and inclusion. But honestly, it sounds a bit like what we call the missionary approach. And it doesn't go deep in the organization. It stayed at communication levels, but it was not lived. So compliance, the soft approach, the flavor of the month approach, and the missionary approach, they have been around in different moments, but each of them by itself is not sufficient, unfortunately.
And that is such a useful framework for this conversation, right? Talking about how the different phases have come about, how organizations have moved through it, and how their commitments have sometimes progressed, sometimes stalled, but thinking about it in those phases. Mm-hmm. I know from doing DEI work as a profession and as a passion, that's something that we share, that it changes you as well, right? There are lessons that you learn about yourself and the way you move through the world from doing this work. And in coaching and leading leaders through these somewhat difficult and challenging conversations. And so as you have, devoted yourself to this passion and this mission, can you share with our audience what some of the major lessons you've learned are? Because that's part of the goal of this series, right? Yeah. Is to inspire others to be able to benefit from the work that you've done and the lessons you've learned.
Actually, there are three key questions that one should address when you have decided to make diversity, equity, and inclusion part of your way of being. So it's a big culture change, and so many times the conversation goes the following way: why at all should we, as an organization, change our culture to become DNIE? Rigged? The why. Many organizations still struggle with the why. You have to take time to reflect and say, why are we doing this? And I'm really pausing here because my experience is that when you ask top managers and board members about why you are doing as an organization a transformational effort in diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's a lot of silence in the room still. Absolutely necessary to talk about it. The second is, what are we going to do? What choices are we going to make? Are we going to be a rather humble investor in what can we allow ourselves to do? How far do we want to go? What are our ambitions? What do we want to do? And the third question is now, how do we make it happen? The how. In the first question, the why, there has been here learning all the time as a passionate person in the area. Actually, I've come to together with some colleagues practitioners to think it's not just about DNI. We speak about the virtuous circle of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What is the virtuous circle? It's a circle which says diversity needs inclusion, so we need to invest via equity. Our leadership has to walk the talk. Oh, and the purpose of the organization has to integrate these thoughts. Let's go once more through the circle. And the first phase of the Y is what I call a hovering in, top down in the organization till everybody has gone through that circle. But since you pose yourself the question a number of times, it's a journey. And we've observed that the journey as such around why diversity, why inclusion, why equity, why do our leaders need to behave, and why should it be part of our purpose? This repetitive circle is a learning journey by itself. When that is mature, you come to the how, the what and the how. The how is around 6 key areas. Just quickly name them and we'll focus on the 3 ones that are the most challenging ones. Bias, we have to talk unconscious bias. Business case, we have to talk moral case, ethical case, business case. Embed new behaviors, I will come back to it. You just referred to it, Sharon. The 4th one is changing process and procedures. The 5th one is KPIs, I will come back to that. And the 6th one is celebrate. So that brings us to the area of embed behavior. Embed behavior is a core change that has to happen in an organization. And actually, embed behavior starts at the top. And what we've observed is that top managers are strong personalities. They have, in general, or sometimes they have come from a privilege, and in their entire career, they have not experienced discrimination. And so having them understand and experience what discrimination is like is for them an awakening experience. My experience is that working with top management in a safe environment, having them discover that and getting for the first time feedback on their non-inclusive behavior is a very important part of the process. Because if top management does not change their behavior, it will never go down in the organization. 80%, research shows that 80% of the credibility of diversity, equity, and inclusion comes from top behavior. That's what people say. So that area of helping top management, chair of the board, the CEO, the top people actually to experience in a safe environment when they are not inclusive and making them learn about how to change their behavior is a very big challenge. 5th area is KPIs. As of today, most organizations have KPI sets driven by financials principally. It's a tough conversation because integrating into the KPI system of an organization a number of indicators that are related to the most important of our assets, the human assets, is a tough conversation. And what weight they take on in the future, be it around inclusiveness indicators of leadership or other indicators like retention of people and why people leave organizations. So KPIs and integrating diversity, equity, inclusion into the KPI system of the organization is an important conversation to have. And finally, there is celebration. We do celebrate many things in organizations. We celebrate the 150 years existence. We celebrate that we've been extremely profitable. But when have we celebrated that colleague of ours who, by his style of leadership, has allowed every individual in his team to develop so that our jaws drop when we realize that that person has been allowed to develop through investment his skills and become this amazing person that this person is now. When have we celebrated the person, the leader who has been able to actually develop each individual way beyond what we expected?
What advice would you give an INSEAD student who is just about to embark on the journey, this really wild, intense, but wonderful journey of an INSEAD MBA? What advice would you give?
Inclusive leadership is a lot about self-awareness. It's one of the preconditions of very, very good inclusive leadership. When you come to INSEAD as an MBA student, use the opportunity to ask yourself the question, where do I come from? Why is it that since I'm a white male coming from Antwerp in Belgium, that I define the world in a certain way? So when you do your MBA, use the opportunity to step out of who you are and let the other colleague look at you and say, hey Sharon, you're from Jamaica. What do you see about me that surprises you? It's not that content-oriented, but it's a lot oriented towards developing a deep understanding about who you are. And very specifically, we're all very busy in our MBA. And I know I'm asking the MBAs to, on purpose, invest in building that self-awareness. And we're young and full of energy. And so what is difficult is, in general, and I was there too, listening. It's not sufficient to ask your MBA colleague, hey, how do you say that I'm different from you? Give me some feedback. What did you notice when I speak that carries certain biases? But then when you get that feedback, to practice deep listening. It's probably one of the skills that top-notch top management, chairs of board, CEOs, that I admire. I've noticed how good they are at listening. Deep listening, which is, I hear what you say, but I also have empathy of how you got to what you're saying. In your MBA, I would recommend you to ask for feedback on who you are and practice deep listening.
If you could go back to when you were an INSEAD student, what advice would you give yourself with the benefit of hindsight, with all the lessons you've learned about inclusive leadership? What advice would you give yourself? And is it different than the advice that you're giving today's MBAs?
There's one component I would have, if I could restart, I think I should have been more courageous to ask more questions. Coming from Belgium and having been in consulting just before my MBA, you're young and you're very energetic and you admire knowledge and you come to the school and you're a little impressed by the environment. And so what you find yourself is running, you're absorbing many things, and myself too, I was absorbing many things. If I could restart, I would actually look to have more courage to actually say, stop, let me ask the following question. If I think how many questions I really asked, it was not enough. And if I could restart it, I would ask a lot more questions.
Oh, brilliant. Dirk, thank you so much. Thank you for your time here today. Thank you for all of the support that you've given to the INSEAD community. And thank you for the lessons that you're helping the current and future generations of inclusive business leaders learn.
Thank you, Sharon, for having had me. Thank you.